The alarm cut through the dark before I even opened my eyes. 3 short bursts of red light swept across the ceiling of my cell, and I was already moving before my mind caught up with my body. 4 months in that place had trained my legs faster than my thoughts. I rolled off the cold slab I slept on and pressed my back against the wall beside the door, listening. Footsteps. Fast ones. Not the slow, dragging patrol steps I had memorized night after night, counting them the way other men might count sheep. These were quick, urgent, and heading away from me, not toward me. Something had gone wrong somewhere else in the facility, and for the first time since they had pulled me off my ship, wrong did not mean me. I pressed my ear to the door. My name was Oliver Grant back when names still meant something to the people around me. Here I was Subject 4, a specimen from a species nobody in this station had ever bothered to learn anything about, beyond how much pain we could absorb before we stopped responding to questions. I had spent 4 months learning them instead. I knew the guard rotations because boredom is a strange teacher, and it had taught me to listen instead of despair. I knew which door panels stuck a half second before they released. I knew that the tool I had lifted from a maintenance cart 3 weeks earlier, a thin rod meant for adjusting airflow vents, could also trip an internal lock if you knew exactly where to press it. Tonight, for the first time, all of that knowledge had somewhere to go. The door released with a soft click, and I stepped into the corridor. The lights here were dimmer than usual, flickering with the strain of whatever had triggered the alarm. I moved low and fast, keeping to the shadows between the wall lamps, and made for the only place in this station I had ever heard the guards speak about with something close to unease. Cell Block 7. I had never seen inside it, but 3 nights earlier, through a gap in the wall vent above my slab, I had heard 2 guards talking in low voices about a prisoner they called valuable. A prize, one of them had said. Something to trade instead of destroy. I did not know her name yet. I only knew that if this station had one prisoner worth keeping alive on purpose, she might be the only other reason for someone to break in from outside, and breaking in from outside was the only thing that explained an alarm shaped like this one. I found the corridor to Block 7 empty, which unsettled me more than if it had been full. Empty meant every guard on this level had been pulled somewhere else, and that never happened by accident. The door to her cell was already open. She stood inside it, back straight, dressed in a torn flight suit, watching me with eyes that held no fear at all, only calculation. She was taller than me by a head, her skin a pale shade of gray-blue that I had never seen on anyone else in this station, and even standing in a cell with an alarm wailing through the walls, she looked like someone who was used to being the most dangerous person in the room. "Are you here to kill me?" she asked, in a voice that suggested she would fight regardless of my answer. "No," I said. "I am here because I heard someone call you valuable, and valuable people usually know things worth knowing." She studied me for a long moment, then nodded once, sharp and decisive. "My name is Alira," she said, "and whatever broke into this station tonight is not here to rescue me. It is here because someone finally traced where I was taken, and they are going to burn this place down looking for me, whether I am inside it or not." That was the moment I understood we were not running from one danger anymore. We were running from 2. The first explosion came from somewhere below us, a deep shudder that ran up through the floor and rattled the walls. Dust sifted down from a ceiling panel above our heads. Alira moved first, faster than I expected, pulling me by the sleeve toward a side corridor I had never explored. "Not that way," she said, when I turned toward the main hall. "That leads past the command deck, and anyone still alive up there will not be friendly to either of us right now. I trust you know this station better than the guards who kept you in it," I said. "I have had 4 months to listen through walls," she answered, "just like you." We ran together through corridors lit only by emergency strips along the floor, past rooms I had spent months imagining and never seeing, until we reached a junction where the air itself seemed to hum with tension. Somewhere ahead, metal screamed against metal, and a chorus of voices barked orders in a language I still only understood in fragments. Alira held up a hand and we both froze. 3 guards stood at the far end of the junction, weapons raised, backs to us, focused entirely on something happening deeper in the station. Whatever they were watching held their full attention, because none of them turned even as we crossed to the shadowed edge of the corridor and slipped past a service hatch half hidden behind a support strut. Behind that hatch was a maintenance shaft, narrow and dark, running down through the station like a spine. "I go first," I said. "I know how these access shafts lock from the inside, and if there is a trap waiting, I would rather it catch me before it catches you." She looked at me like she was recalculating something, and then stepped back to let me pass. "You are not what I expected from your species," she said quietly. "Most people never expect much from us," I answered, and climbed down into the dark. The shaft dropped 3 levels before opening into a narrow access corridor that ran along the outer hull of the station. Cold radiated through the metal here, seeping in from the vacuum just beyond the walls, and every few seconds another distant impact shuddered through the structure, closer now than before. "Someone is shelling this station from orbit," Illyra said, pressing her palm briefly against the wall as if she could feel the pattern of the strikes through her skin. "That means a ship is close enough to dock, if we can reach a hangar before the hull gives out." "I know where one hangar is," I said. "I passed it once, months ago, when they moved me between holding blocks. I never told anyone I remembered the path." "Why does that not surprise me?" she said, and there was something almost like humor under the tension in her voice. We moved fast through corridors growing more chaotic by the minute, guards shouting past us without seeing us, red warning lights sweeping in wild patterns across every wall. Twice we pressed ourselves into shadowed alcoves as patrols rushed by, too distracted by the growing chaos above to notice 2 prisoners moving quietly against the flow. The hangar, when we reached it, was smaller than I remembered, barely large enough to hold 2 transport shuttles, one of which had already been stripped for parts. The other sat dark and silent, its boarding ramp still down from whatever hurried departure the guards had made when the alarms first sounded. "That one," Illyra said, already moving toward it. "It is old, but it will fly." I followed her up the ramp, my legs burning, my lungs aching from the run, and the moment we crossed into the cockpit she dropped into the pilot's seat like she had been born in one just like it. "Strap in," she said. "This will not be gentle." I barely had the harness across my chest before she brought the engines online, and the whole shuttle groaned in protest as it lifted off the hangar floor. The station tore open in front of us as we cleared the hangar doors, a jagged wound of torn metal venting atmosphere into the black in a silent, glittering cloud. Beyond it, half hidden in the debris field, a warship hung like a predator waiting to see what crawled out of the wreckage. "That is not a rescue ship," Illyra said, her voice tight. "That is an Ushkarai cruiser, and it does not care whether we are prisoners or escapees. It only cares that we are loose." "Then we should stop being visible," I said. She gave a short, humorless laugh and threw the shuttle into a hard bank, cutting between 2 drifting chunks of hull plating just as a beam of white light lanced through the space we had occupied a heartbeat earlier. "They are firing," I said, unnecessarily. "They are always firing," she answered. "The trick is making sure they are firing at where we were, not where we are." The next several minutes passed in a blur of motion and noise, the shuttle bucking under near misses, alarms chirping across the console in patterns I did not understand, but Illyra read without hesitation, her hands moving with the practiced calm of someone who had done this before, even if never quite like this. "There is a debris trail ahead, thick enough to hide our signature if we can reach it before they lock on properly," she said. "But I need both hands free, and I need someone watching the rear scanner so I do not have to split my attention." "Tell me what to watch for," I said, sliding into the seat beside her. "Anything that gets brighter instead of dimmer," she said. "Brighter means closer. Closer means we are almost out of time." I kept my eyes fixed on the small glowing display, watching 3 distant shapes on the scanner that I hoped were debris and feared were something else entirely. For a long moment, none of them moved. Then one of them grew brighter. "Left side," I said. "Something is gaining." Illyra's hands moved instantly, rolling the shuttle hard to the right just as another beam of light split the darkness where we had been a moment before, close enough that the shockwave of displaced debris rattled against the hull. "Hold on to something," she said, and pushed the throttle forward into the thickest part of the debris field. Chunks of broken hull and frozen wreckage tumbled past the viewport, some close enough that I could see the scorch marks left by the very first blasts that had torn the station open. Illyra threaded the shuttle between them with a precision that made my chest tighten with something between fear and awe. And behind us, the pursuing shapes on the scanner began to fall back, their sensors unable to separate our signature from the drifting wreckage around us. "I think we lost them," I said quietly, watching the brightest shape on the scanner begin, at last, to dim. "Do not think it too loudly," Illyra said. "Space like this does not reward confidence." A sharp beeping cut through the cockpit before either of us could relax, a red light blinking hard across the console near Illyra's left hand. "What is that?" I asked. "Coolant line," she said, scanning the readout with narrowed eyes. "One of the earlier hits must have cracked a seal near the engine housing. If it keeps leaking at this rate, the engine overheats and shuts down before we ever reach a jump point." "Can you fix it from here?" I asked. "Not from here," she said. "There is a maintenance panel in the rear compartment. Someone needs to reroute the flow manually while I keep this ship steady enough for that someone not to be thrown into a wall." I unbuckled before she finished the sentence and made my way back through the narrow passage behind the cockpit, bracing myself against the shuddering frame of the shuttle as it weaved through the last scattered edges of the debris field. The maintenance panel sat low along the rear wall, half hidden behind a bundle of cabling, and when I pried it open, a thin hiss of pale vapor curled out into the cramped compartment. "Talk me through it," I called forward, my voice raised over the whine of overworked engines. "There should be 2 valves side by side," she called back. "The left one feeds the damaged line. Close it fully, then open the smaller valve beside it halfway, no more, or you will flood the backup line instead of relieving the first one." My hands found the valves by feel more than sight, the metal cold and slick with condensation, and I turned the first one slowly, feeling resistance build until it clicked into place. The hiss softened. I eased the second valve open exactly as far as she had described, counting the turns under my breath, and the pale vapor thinned to nothing. "Done," I called out, or at least, I think I am done. The whine of the engines dropped in pitch a moment later, settling into something steadier, and Alira's voice came back, tight with relief. "You are done," she said. "Whatever you just did, the readout is already correcting itself. Get back up here before the next stretch of open space decides to test us again." I made my way back to the cockpit and dropped into the seat beside her, my hands still faintly numb from the cold metal of the valves, and for a moment, neither of us said anything at all, both listening to the engines hum in a rhythm that finally sounded safe. We cleared the debris field 20 minutes later, the station and its wreckage shrinking behind us into a smear of light against the black. Alira set a course toward a jump point she said would take us far outside Ushkarai patrol routes, her hands finally slowing on the controls as the immediate danger fell away. I sat back in my seat and allowed myself, for the first time in 4 months, to breathe without counting the seconds until the next threat arrived. "You never told me your name," Alira said, glancing at me for the first time since we had boarded. "Oliver," I said. "Oliver Grant." She repeated it once, quietly, as if testing the shape of it in her mouth, and then looked back to the console. "You did not have to come looking for me, Oliver Grant," she said. "You could have used that alarm and that broken door to save only yourself." I thought about the 4 months of listening through walls, cataloging rotations, memorizing every weakness a board guard let slip in casual conversation, all of it with no plan beyond survival, until the moment a name like Valuable had given that knowledge somewhere to go. "I did not come looking for you because it was easy," I said. "I came because it was the first thing in 4 months that felt like it mattered more than just getting myself out." She did not answer right away, but something in the set of her shoulders eased, just slightly, and for the rest of that long, quiet flight through open space, neither of us spoke about danger again. The jump itself lasted only a few seconds by the ship's clock, though it felt far longer, a stretching, twisting sensation that left my stomach somewhere behind the rest of me. When the stars snapped back into clear, ordinary points of light, Alira exhaled slowly and let her hands fall away from the controls. "We are clear," she said, "for now." "Where does clear take us?" I asked. "Home," she said. "Or what is left of home once I explain why I vanished for so long, and why I am arriving with a stranger from a species most of my people have never even heard of." "I imagine that conversation will not be simple," I said. "No conversation involving my grandmother ever is," Alira answered, and for the first time since I had met her she almost smiled. The days that followed the jump passed in a strange, quiet rhythm neither of us had experienced in months. We took turns sleeping, sharing rations that tasted like nothing I recognized but kept my strength up regardless, and slowly, without either of us quite planning it, we began to talk about things that had nothing to do with survival. She told me about a childhood spent training with blades before she had ever been trusted with real authority, about a mother who had died before Alira was old enough to remember her face clearly, and a grandmother who ruled with a sternness that had once terrified her, and now, from a distance, felt almost like comfort. I told her about a life that must have sounded impossibly small by comparison, growing up in a place where the biggest danger most days was disappointing the people who depended on you, and how strange it felt to realize that the same instincts that had once helped me survive ordinary disappointment had somehow carried me through something so much larger. "We are not so different," she said one quiet stretch of ship time, watching the stars slide past the viewport. "Your people learned to survive by paying attention to everything around you. Mine learned to survive by becoming the strongest thing in the room. I am starting to think your way might be the harder skill to master." "I do not know about harder," I said, "just quieter." "Quiet has kept us both alive this week," she said. "I will take quiet." The final approach to her home world came without warning, A sudden shift from open black to a horizon crowded with orbital platforms and slow-moving transport vessels, all of it circling a planet wrapped in soft green and blue light. Illyra's hands tightened on the controls as we entered the atmosphere, and I noticed, for the first time since the escape began, a flicker of something like nerves crossing her face. "They think I am dead," she said quietly. "They have probably already mourned me. Walking back in changes everything for them, and I do not know yet if that change will be welcome." "Whatever happens in there," I said, "you already survived the part that could have killed you. Everything after this is just a conversation." She glanced at me, and this time the almost smile became something closer to real. "You have a strange way of making terrifying things sound simple, Oliver Grant," she said. "Someone taught me that panic wastes time you do not have," I answered. "I figured it might work just as well down here as it did up there." The palace grounds, when we finally landed, were unlike anything I had ever imagined a home could look like. Towers of pale stone rising into a sky, streaked gold with the setting light of a sun I had never seen before that day. Guards moved to intercept us the moment our shuttle touched down, weapons half raised, faces caught between suspicion and disbelief the instant they recognized the woman stepping down the ramp beside me. News of our arrival moved faster than we did, spreading room to room ahead of us until, by the time we reached the palace's inner halls, every face we passed had already rearranged itself into something between shock and quiet, disbelieving hope. "I do not know what waits for us beyond those doors," Illyra said, pausing just before the final entrance, her voice lower than I had heard it since the escape began. "Whatever it is," I said, "you will not be walking into it alone." She looked at me for a long moment, then nodded once, the same sharp, decisive gesture I had first seen in a cell 4 months and a lifetime ago. "Then let us go find out together," she said, and pushed the doors open. They swung wide without a sound, revealing a hall crowded with people who had already begun preparing for a future without her. Every one of them frozen mid-motion the instant they saw who had just walked through the entrance beside a quiet stranger, who had never once, in 4 months, stopped listening for a way out.